How did you get into this world?
From the very first moment I stepped into that office, I just knew that that was the place that I wanted to work. You could have the most beautiful glass meeting room, but if you can hear what's happening in the meeting room next door, then it's effectively...
You sound like you've watched a few of my videos. Not many people have that luck with their first job.
I'd probably say, Dan, what are you going to do when you grow up?
Yeah. What's the general trend around London at the moment in terms of occupation and kind of the way things are moving?
When I first started working in the city, the highest rent was about £70 a square foot. Somebody's just taken space in the old Economist building in St James's. They're paying £240
That's
a
ridiculous.
square foot.
What do you see happening then over the next 5 years?
There are now credible reports saying, yeah, we could be 2 or 3 years out from zero vacancies. But then the question is, does it work?
The last thing you want is to walk into a meeting room and for that meeting room to not function.
We're probably heading into some really difficult years.
Our company's going, it's going to get better.
10% of all the insurance that gets written in the world gets written in one building in London.
How do I build flexibility around that?
But we'd really enjoyed being part of something bigger.
If I have an office move coming up, what advice would you give me? Hello and welcome to the Future Workplace Podcast. Now, the idea behind the Future Workplace Podcast is to bring experts on to talk about what the future of workplace looks like. That could be anything from physical infrastructure, real estate, through to the mental aspect of people actually working. Do we work from home more or not? That's the idea. What we then do is we bring those experts on to discuss their specific area of expertise, which ultimately gives you the option to choose your episode and watch the one that you want to watch based on the requirements that you have. Now, all that we ask for in return is that you like and you subscribe to this particular podcast on the platform that you're watching this on here. The reason we ask for that is because the more people we get to watch it, the more people get to subscribe to it, the more experts we get to bring on, and the more we can fulfill the requirements that you guys have. That's all we ask for. Completely free. Click the link, subscribe, follow, enjoy the content. Now, the next expert that we're bringing onto the show is Chris Aqualina. Hello, Chris.
Hi, Chris. Thank you so much for having me.
Welcome to the show.
Here.
Welcome to the show. I'm obviously really excited to bring you in. Senior Director, Spring 4. I think in my little intro there, I mentioned that we obviously tried to bring experts on to talk about their specific area of expertise, with the underwriting question being about what don't you know that you should know when it comes to the future of workplace. So with all of that being said, I've met you, we've spoken a few times before, but for those of you that don't know you, who are you? What are Spring 4? Why are you here? why have I invited you on?
Sure, okay. So I've been in the real estate industry for 20 years, and I've spent all of those 20 years at Spring 4, which is just it's a phenomenal place to work, and it's been a great career. But what do we actually do at Spring 4? So I'm a chartered surveyor by trade, as we all are at Spring 4, but we have a very specific niche, which is we represent occupiers. So we are tenant advisors, tenant representatives, and we advise our clients on their corporate real estate strategies. And it's really focused on offices. So anybody who has an office, who has a lease or a license, we help them to find new premises, renegotiate existing leases. We help them with relocations, with rent reviews, with dilapidations at the end of the lease, really anything that relates to their occupation of offices.
Brilliant. So it's quite an all-encompassing end-to-end service that you're doing. Let's rewind. Let's go further back, because you found yourself in that position now. You got yourself to a senior director level. Great. Let's go back a few years and figure out how, let's talk about the journey getting up to that. So talk me about your upbringing. How did you get into this world?
Sure. So I went off to university in 2001. Went up to Birmingham to study politics and had 3 incredible years at Birmingham, and came back to London and had an even better time on a year out traveling the world, backpacking around the world, which was fantastic. And I remember getting back home after my kind of 6 months gallivanting around the world.
Yeah.
And I barely unpacked, and my father sat me down, and I'll never forget this evening in that conversation. And he basically made it very, very clear that it was time for me to think about what I was going to do.
You have to grow up. You only had 6 months, for Christ's sake.
Yeah. Well, plus my 3 years of having a great time at university as well.
Gotcha.
So, I think maybe he could see the direction of travel, and he felt I just needed a little nudge to remind me that I needed to knuckle down at some point. So, in fairness to him, it was probably a well-timed intervention. And we were sat in the living room just talking about it, and he said, what do you think you might want to do when you grow up? And
when you grow up, you've been to uni, you've travelled, but when you grow up, what do you fancy doing? And you can't say astronaut.
I had this phenomenal list of exciting things that I wanted to do. I wanted to maybe be a journalist, maybe a firefighter, kind of quite a few off the wall ideas. And he kind of nodded along. And at the end of it, we went through my list, and he said, I think you should go into real estate.
Right.
and he convinced me that I should do. For whatever reason, he felt that it would suit my personality.
Yeah.
And I went with it. So I went off and I spent a year at a place called Cass Business School, which is now called Bayes Business School. It's the business school associated with City University. I had a fantastic year there, studying for a real estate master's. And do you know what? I think the old man was probably right.
Yeah,
I had a great
he's still
time doing
going.
that. And that course came to an end in 2006. And I was out and interviewing for jobs. And I had a lot of interviews with lots of different firms, all the big firms, as part of the Milk Round, which is the traditional recruitment roadshow for really graduate recruitment generally. But over the course of that Milk Round, I came across this small firm, Spring4. They were a boutique. I'd never heard of them, being completely honest. And from the very first moment I stepped into that office, I just knew that was the place that I wanted to work. It was just a very dynamic environment. You have to remember, this is 2006.
Yeah.
So the workplace was a different, these were different times. I walked into that office and they were already all on Blackberries at the time. Nobody else had really adopted Blackberries in the real estate market at that time. We were kind of a little bit late to the game, real estate technology wise. People were just working off standard mobile phones, but they had rolled out very quickly. And just seen it as an opportunity. So everybody within the company was working on their Blackberries and super efficient. And it just felt like an extremely dynamic place, a real entrepreneurial spirit.
When was that? 2006? You're still there now?
2006.
20 years.
So 20 years later, still
I'll tell you what, fair play. You've landed on your feet in terms of going into a company and recognising that this is a bit of me. And still, not many people have that luck with their first job, where they're still there 20 years later. Specifically in today's day and age, I think it's a bit different. You and obviously your dad was kind of a trigger to you making that decision. You've got your own young family now, right? How would your approach to your lad be different, if at all, from the approach that your dad took with you?
Great question. I think he is. So my son, he is 10 years old. Sorry, that's wrong. He's 11. He won't be impressed with that. He actually had his birthday 4th of January. He is infinitely more focused than I was at his age, and I don't know whether that's just a personality thing, or whether it's just the way kids are these days. But the degree of focus that he has. When I was 11 years old, I was just completely spaced out. Still watching cartoons. Whereas I come down in the mornings and he's on his iPad and ask him what he's doing. He's doing like chess puzzles.
Really?
Yeah. So he loves chess. He plays a lot of chess at school. His school's pretty cool in that, they push quite a diverse curriculum.
Yeah.
So chess is mandatory up until the age of 11. So whereas when I was at school, playing chess was super geeky. Actually at his school, everybody wants to be on the chess team. He's really lent into it, and he got into the national finals last year. But that's just one side of it. He thinks about what he eats. I'm very focused on diet and exercise and so forth, but it's rubbed off on him. And
at 10-year-old you wasn't though, was you?
No, absolutely. That's right. 10, 11 years old. I was just cramming in
Crazy.
anything, whatever was put in front of me. But he's out running, training 3 times a week.
Wow.
He's like a little mini version of me, really. Which I really enjoy.
He's going to sit you down one day and go, Dad, are you sure you want to be doing this?
Yes,
Tables be switched.
Well, he'll probably say, Dad, what are you going to do when you grow up? But I've tried to have that conversation with him. What do you think you might do when you get older? And my wife is she's a doctor, she's a general practitioner, but she also has a business on the side. She does medical aesthetics as a kind of a side business alongside being a GP. So he's got a few things that he can see and take inspiration from. He frankly has got no idea what he wants to do.
Well, he's 11.
Except generally he wants it to be something to do with sports. He doesn't really know what that he doesn't know what that looks like yet.
Yeah. That's amazing. What a great story. And fair play to your dad for sitting you down and saying, come on, Chris, let's grow up. Let's grow up a little bit now.
And to be honest, he probably called it right.
Yeah. So tell me about Spring 4 then. So what, speaking to a 5-year-old, if I'm a 5-year-old asking, if I'm your young lad, he's not 5, he's 11, but if I'm your young lad and saying, Dad, what is it that you do? Talk me through that as if you're talking to an 11-year-old kid.
Sure. So we have quite a number of corporate clients at Spring 4 who have multiple locations around the country and indeed internationally. And I'd say that's really our specialism. We advise people with multiple locations. It might be they might have a glitzy head office in London, in central London. They might have a couple of call centres and then a regional network of offices around the UK. And we'll sit there as almost an asset manager for their leases. We have a laser focus on holding very accurate data. So we often end up knowing their portfolios better than they do. So we can help them with their long-term planning. When have you got a lease expiry coming up? When have you got a lease break? And then we can make sure they're planning well in advance so that they know what they can do to their portfolio. They can then dovetail that into their ambitions for the business. Where do they want to be growing? Where do they think they're going to be recruiting? And then we can help mold the real estate strategy around their strategy. And what does that actually mean in practice? So if they are coming up to a lease expiry, say in their London office, and London is a big hub for them, we can help. We'll analyse what is the programme. When do you need to start thinking about moving? And it totally depends how big the space is. If you're under 10,000 square feet a year out, but if you're 15, 20, 50,000 square feet, then you need to be thinking about those kind of moves much further out, particularly with the current market dynamics, which we can come on to later on, because it's absolutely critical to the challenges that occupiers face today. So we'll help them put together a strategy. We can help them on the way out of leases, because people always think on a relocation, it's all about where are you going to, but actually there's lots to be considered around the exit. So on things like break clauses, lots of the time occupiers will think they've got a break clause. It's as simple as that. Whereas many leases are drafted in a way that can trip you up. So there'll be conditions around the break. And they are often structured in a way that it's actually intended that the tenant will trip themselves up on the break condition. And so that could be anything from the payment of rent to certain works that you have to do at the end of the lease. And if they're not done to standard, then the break clause is rendered invalid, and then your lease runs on to expiry. So we can help navigate that. And then once you've successfully operated the break, or your lease has just come to an end, you have dilapidations. So we can help with dilapidations as well, which is effectively you have to hand back the premises in the same condition broadly as you took it. And there's a huge amount of money at stake on dilapidations where somebody's done a significant fit out. So that's the kind of the way out. And then where are you going next? We can source buildings in the market. So we'll take a detailed brief from you and work with the occupier to refine that brief. go out and find all the buildings that match. We'll report it to the client, then take them out on the road, look at all the options, help them to refine that down into a short list, whether that's through some scoring system or whatever metric they want to apply to help them to find the best option for them. And then once we've focused in on a couple of options, maybe 3 options, we then go into bat on the negotiation. And that's really where a lot of occupiers will see us earning our fee, because we live and breathe negotiation. For the 20 years that I've been in real estate, what I've really been doing is I've been negotiating with counterparties on deals of all shapes and sizes. So we put together the heads of terms, and that is the basis of the deal. So that will cover things like, what's the rent, which space are they taking, how long's the lease, when are the break clauses, what are the conditions around the break clauses, and I try to keep those conditions as clean and simple as possible.
Favourable to the occupier,
so as not to get tripped up in the way that I described. And also the heads of terms will also cover things like, what do you have to do at the end of the lease? So the dilapidation. So you can govern what your exit looks like by negotiating right at the start of the lease. So that then goes off to the solicitors. The tenant will have their solicitor, the landlord will have their solicitor. The heads of terms are agreed between the parties, and that forms the basis of then the contract negotiation, which always goes on much longer than everybody wants.
Hence the timelines that you set earlier in the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
I think people tend to think that a lease can be agreed between the solicitors in 6 to 8 weeks. However, practical experience tells me it often goes on 3 months. That process. So when you think about the life cycle of going out and securing new premises, once the agent's appointed, you might spend a couple of weeks getting the brief, a couple of weeks sourcing the building, a few weeks out on tour, maybe a couple of different tours. So you're probably 2 months in. Then you've sourced the preferred option. That negotiation might take a month, and then you might be in the legal process for 2-3 months, and that's just to get your lease. That's a solid
before anything else.
Lease. But then you're going to fit out. So offices, generally speaking, will come in. Well, it used to be the case they'd come in what we call Cat A condition, which is the floor, the ceiling, and the tenant fits it out to suit their requirements. What happens now is that there's a whole range of different.
Who manages those products? So you're going into Cat A, Cat B, and I'll let you explain what the difference is and those things in a minute. But who manages those products? Is it you as almost the broker, if you like, of this whole process? And then you manage a fit-out company that will do Cat A, Cat B. And again, I'll let you explain what those terms mean in a moment. Who manages the product?
Sure, okay. So sometimes the client will come to us and tell us what they want. They might have a clear vision as what they need. And I always think of the options as a spectrum. At the most flexible end, with the least work required, you've got serviced offices, which is like renting a hotel room. If you want a serviced office, you could probably have a license in place by tomorrow. If you worked hard to get it, and you'll get the keys, and your space will be furnished. You can plug straight into the IT. That's at one end of the spectrum, and at the other end of the spectrum, you've got the Cat A offices that I talked about, where somebody comes in and fits it out. The tenant comes in and fits it out. But we also have clients that don't know exactly what they want. So they may end up looking at a range of different options across that spectrum. So I've given you the two extremes, which are serviced offices, the ultimate plug and play, versus Cat A, which requires an extensive fit out with all the cost and timescales that involves. But then in between, there's these kind of emerging options. So you have managed offices, which it's the next step up from serviced offices, where the tenant will have their own space, they can brand it and so forth, but the lease will be all encompassing with a much greater degree of certainty. So it might include the dilapidations at the end. It might include certain services the landlord's going to provide. It'll likely include a fit out, whether that's bespoke or whether it's inheriting an existing fit out in a in an existing managed office space. Then the next step up from that is maybe you're taking a lease on Cat B space.
Yeah.
Where the
define Cat B for us.
The Cat B is really the fit out.
Yeah.
So it's fitted out with the meeting rooms, with the private offices, with the kitchen, maybe even with the furniture. And so lots of landlords now are speculatively fitting out offices to encourage tenants to take it. They're marketing it with that fit out in situ because lots of people don't move because of the cost of fitting out. So that capex on a relocation is difficult.
It's expensive.
It's extremely expensive
when you consider the delaps on the lease and the lease event from the previous place.
Yeah,
and then you got the fit out costs.
Yeah,
it's an expensive exercise.
It's an expensive exercise. Yeah, so they try and tempt people into moving by A, taking out the hassle of fitting out, and B, the expense because they've done it. Now, what the downside of that is that you're inheriting a fit out that somebody else has designed for you. So it's not really,
and you're paying for it anyway, just on a different model.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to get under the skin of a fit out before signing on the lease, because it's very easy to walk into an office space and say, this is magnificent. It looks so sharp. It looks corporate like, it's business like.
Yeah.
But then the question is, does it work? You can have the most beautiful glass meeting room in the world, but if you can hear what's happening in the meeting room next door, then it's effectively...
You sound like you've watched a few of my videos.
But I think that's what people really want. They want functional office space. And I think that's something we can definitely get into is what do tenants really want from the space? What makes a good workplace? And the truth is, it's not beanbags and slides and whimsical nonsense.
You're spending 2 hours getting into London, sitting next to smelly old Greg on the tube, and you've got your nose in someone's armpit for a half an hour tube from Bank to Canary Wharf or whatever it may be. The last thing you want is to walk into a meeting room and for that meeting room to not function in exactly the same way or better than you having a Zoom meeting at home.
Absolutely.
The last thing you want. No one's interested in the beanbags. Well, not to my knowledge anyway. So let's start going down that route then. So we're talking Cat A, we're talking Cat B. I want to rewind a little bit. I want to come back to that bit in a few moments' time. But let's talk specifically around London and occupier trends. What's going on at the moment? What's the general trend around London at the moment in terms of occupation and kind of the way things are moving?
London's a really interesting point. Now, I think it's no secret that the UK economy is not firing on all cylinders. However, we are still seeing demand. So the demand side of the market is holding up reasonably well.
What's driving that? Given the political challenges that you've just referred to a few moments ago, and the economic challenges that we're going through at the moment, what is driving that? Is it a sentiment thing? Is it are companies going, it's going to get better?
I think let's not lose sight of the fact that London is the most incredible city. Possibly the most incredible city in the whole world.
It's unbelievable, yeah.
So what makes London amazing? The UK has the English language, incredibly widely spoken. We've got strong rule of law. If you have assets here, they're not going to disappear.
Yeah.
London is an incredible time zone that sits between Europe and the Far East and the US. It's the fifth or sixth largest economy in the world, so we have a big domestic market anyway.
Yeah.
We have a rich history of financial services. You walk around London and every major global bank is represented there. And those things don't pop up in other places overnight because the ecosystem around having a global financial center is huge. It's have you got the office stock? Have you got the schools to provide a world-class education for the children of the footloose international class that will go to the next big city.
Yeah.
Okay, there was talk about the exodus of the financial markets to Geneva. There just aren't enough world-class schools in Geneva to provide an education for if every financial institution in London decamped to Geneva. And is Geneva as fun as London? Absolutely not. People still want to be in London. It's an incredible place. So let's not do London a disservice. It's still a financial powerhouse. It's the world centre of the foreign exchange trade. 10% of all the insurance that gets written in the world gets written in one building in London, in the Lloyd's building.
Yeah.
London has a lot to offer.
Yeah.
And it's been at the forefront of finance for decades. Even before the Big Bang, before Thatcher came in and deregulated and had the Big Bang and the growth of financial services. I mean, London has historically been this financial epicenter.
Yeah.
But then the next wave has been kind of fintech, playing on the strength of the finances and then bringing that tech side to it. And then, as I've already alluded to, insurance. London is just a huge insurance hub. So I think there's lots of reasons why London has grounds to be optimistic. And there is just a churn of occupiers. So there's so much negativity in the press about the UK and London. And a lot of it's kind of apocalyptic. Why would anybody want to be here? And the truth is, people want to be here because it's still an incredible place to do business. So I think when I talk about the occupier market and I talk about demand being good, it's kind of solid.
Right.
I don't think it's because we're seeing an influx of new businesses into the UK. It's just we've got great fundamentals and there's always a steady churn of people with lease expiries, people growing, people taking less space. There's always a churn in the market. So you're always going to have people.
Do you see that churn based off of the way that we work now? So obviously the podcast is the Future Workplace podcast. Do you see that churn in that organizations are saying, well, we want you back in the office, so we need to take on more space and we're going to go through all of this CapEx expenditure and designs and all this, and we want you back in the office? Or are you referring to churn as the opposite way, which is a little bit more, well, actually, we don't need all of this space because we've got a hybrid working policy and we're allowing you to work from home, so we're going to move because we're going to downsize. Yeah. What does the term churn mean in that sense?
I think it's a bit of both, really. Yeah, there will always be people who have expiries that need to move, and it might be because they're growing or it might be because they're downsizing. And as long as there's activity at one end of the market, then people are going to need to move from one office to another, and there's going to be transactions happening in the market. Now, one of the big trends that we've seen over the last few years is just a bifurcation in the market. So it's become a bit of a cliche, really, that the flight to quality. And so when I talk about a bifurcation in the market, I'm talking about a split from people, or really the overwhelming demand for the best in class offices.
Right.
So if you have a brand new grade A building, then you're sitting very well at the moment. You're going to have people queuing up to take that space. And a lot of it comes down to the post-pandemic era. So pre-pandemic, if your boss told you to be in the office 5 days a week, then it really wasn't really up for debate. It was just as standard. Yeah. Everyone gets sent home during the pandemic, lots of people get quite comfortable at home, don't really want to come back. And it's understandable, Lots of people are spending £5,000 a year to commute into London. So after tax, that's a substantial pay rise by not coming in. I'd argue that it has an impact then on the culture of the organisation. Yeah. And I I I'm not the only person saying that.
I've had people on this as guests, and I'm in the same boat.
Yeah. Well, you had the number one spokesperson for not working from home in Sean Simons, and he had a great conversation with you around that. So I think as employers want their staff to come back into the office, they understand that they have to give their staff a good workplace.
Yeah.
There's no point offering somebody a second grade office when they can sit at home and join a Zoom meeting and have better IT than if they come into the office.
Yeah.
So that's why there's been this rush in the market towards the best in class offices.
Yeah.
And it's really about the war for talent. If you want to attract the best quality people, then you have to offer them the best quality.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed the podcast so far. I'm just going to take a quick 30 seconds of your time to explain to you one of the biggest problems that people have when it comes to fitting out their new office space. And that problem is they get AV in too late. When they get AV in too late, what happens is they treat it as an afterthought. They treat it as a bolt-on. It's a few screens on a wall. Let's just put some screens on and make it work. Massive, massive, massive mistake. And we see it day in, day out, where people treat AV as an afterthought. To try and avoid that mistake, you need to bring AV in, the design of AV in really early as you possibly can. Now, to try and help you with that, we've put together what we called an AV bundle. It's a bundle. The link is in the description below, and it gives you the ability to configure your own AV meeting room so you know what solution you're putting in the rooms. It gives you a risk map for the project so you know when to bring AV in, and it gives you a budget calculator so that you can budget AV in early as opposed to later when you realize that AV, frankly, isn't as cheap as what everybody thinks. So grab the bundle below, get AV in as early as you possibly can, and avoid the mistakes that lots of our clients actually do when it comes to refitting their offices. And it's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because one of the notes we've got here is, you know, what do occupiers really want? And I'm always intrigued by this question because if you've got a selection of people that are in charge of an office move, what's the process around them making the decisions that they make? And what I mean by that is, do they go through a process of what their employees really want? Or is it just a case of me and you sitting around a table and going, Chris, we need to move offices, I really fancy a football table in the cafeteria, let's make it happen. So when I ask the question, what do occupiers really want? I suppose it's a two-pronged question. A, what do the budget holders and the stakeholders really want? And B, what do the employees really want?
I think if they're smart, they will be engaging with their employees and working with expert consultants to work out exactly what it is that they need to provide. Now, I'm not saying that everybody does that because not everyone's totally enlightened about this speciality, really. You know, lots of people will not give it perhaps as much thought as it needs to have. But we see so much of this because as well as doing the leasing and the transaction side of offices for occupiers, Springfort also have a construction project management business. So we deliver the interior fit outs for occupiers. And so when we're delivering those, we will help the client to build their full panel of consultants. So as the project manager, we help with the architect selection, with the quantity surveyor selection, and so forth. And then ultimately, once you've got the design, we help them to go into the market and tender the fit out with contractors and help them to find the best people to work with. But in terms of what occupiers really want, I'd say the vast majority of employees just want to know that they can go into an office where the IT is going to work perfectly, where the AV, which is, of course, your world, they want to know that if they turn up and they go and sit in a meeting room, they can press a button and they're going to be on a Zoom meeting because they can do that at home. So if you're going to drag them in from their comfortable home, make them spend thousands of pounds traveling into the office, you better believe that you need to provide them with an efficient workplace.
Yeah.
And I think there are new trends that go beyond providing just the tech. I think people want an agile workplace. You know, people don't want to be a lab rat chained to a desk. They want to be able to jump off their desk and have a 5-minute collaboration session at a high table with 2 or 3 people. They want to be able to go and have a private phone call. And it used to be that meeting rooms for 8 people were most often occupied by a single person making a telephone call. I think phone booths have been incredible in terms of making workplaces more efficient rather than spending £20,000-30,000 building a full meeting room space that's never used for
just for Frank to use it on a Wednesday because he's got a phone call to make. And measuring that data as well, which is another part of it, is understanding what the previous occupier solution was versus, and measuring the data from that versus what the new solution is going to be.
And there's so much, there's so many smart systems out there that will help you to gather that data, whether it's at desk sensors to tell you which desks get used on which day, between which hours, how often is somebody in for half an hour, blocks out a desk space and then disappears and you never see them for the rest of the day. And there's lots of very, very smart people in that world who will tell you how your space is actually being used, which is, funnily enough, where you should start when you're trying to decide what you want for your next space.
Absolutely true. Yeah, absolutely true.
Can I just to bring it back slightly to your question about what's happening in London, where's the market? I think we talked about half of the story, which is the demand side, and I think the demand story is strong or solid. But I think the really interesting thing about London is on the supply side, and that's what's driving rents.
Right.
Because whilst demand is solid, supply has been in kind of a decline all the way back since 2016, really since Brexit. All the uncertainty around Brexit, a lot of developers put the brakes on new schemes, and that slowed down the delivery of new speculative office build. Just as we were getting to the end of that, the uncertainty around Brexit, we then, of course, have the pandemic in 2020, which brings a whole new world of uncertainty. Yeah. Again, developers are thinking long and hard before they break ground on a new site. And then one of the most profound effects of really the pandemic and the economic circumstances around it has been rampant inflation, which has driven up build costs. So again, the third wave of reasons for developers to be very cautious about developing is construction costs. Construction costs are so high now. The rents that people need to achieve in order to deliver a new building in London are just eye-watering. I've heard people talking about, you need £150 a square foot for schemes to stack up for a kind of a 2030 delivery.
Crazy.
So what you've had is this choking of the development pipeline whilst demand is still there.
Still high.
And it's basic economics of supply and demand. And we're getting to a pinch point. And there are now credible reports saying we could be 2 or 3 years out from zero vacancy in London, which is just an incredible...
What fixes it?
So I think that if somebody went out and picked up a market report for offices from a big consultancy, the vacancy rates that they see aren't necessarily going to show zero vacancy. But I think what's hidden in that is a lot of buildings that are obsolete, where they can't be retrofitted to meet the necessary energy performance.
I was going to ask about that because this is a large thing that's coming in, and I don't know whether the government have changed it or not based on reality versus expectations, but I think is it 2030 where they're saying that they all need to be A-rated energy ratings, and it's just we're nowhere near it. So is that the thing that fixes it? Because I'm thinking, what fixes the supply issue? Is it clearly brand new builds is a difficult capital expenditure and commercial decision to make because of the costs that you need to get on rent. But the other side to it is actually retrofitting offices to match the energy requirements that the government are putting in. Does that fix it?
Well, I think the government can legislate, but they can't then deliver the growth. And I think one of the problems we've seen with government is kind of the impotence. So you see it a lot in house building, for example. How many times have we had governments that have said we're going to build 300,000 houses a year, and they just never deliver it because the government doesn't build houses. They just have to create the circumstances that allow house builders to make a decision that building new houses is economically...
It's commercially viable.
And you have exactly the same thing with office buildings. And the government has... probably rightly, a strong green agenda to make sure that the buildings that are in the market are environmentally friendly and not contributing to CO2 emissions and therefore climate change. But they can only give the rules around it. They can't then give a situation that makes people able to deliver those kind of buildings. So you still need the economics to stack up.
Yeah.
The problem is that there are some buildings which their very nature, the very fabric of them, make it very difficult to retrofit them to meet the most rigorous of environmental standards. So that could be, for example, you think of the West End of London. Most of the buildings in London's West End are not purpose-built office buildings. Most of them are townhouses that have been converted to offices. Yeah, they're probably in listed, or they're in a huge conservation area. So lots of them will still be single glazed. Yeah, and there's just only so much you can really do to those kind of buildings. Yeah. And so they might just get to the point where they just cannot be brought up to the necessary standards. And so, quite frankly, I don't think the government can solve the supply issue in one fell swoop. You just need the economics. But this is where the economics is heading, because supply is so stunted, weak, and demand's reasonably strong. We're seeing rents just flying. Yeah. So at the top end. So Ripple have just paid £150 a square foot for space at 1 Leadenhall in the city. When I first started working in the city as a real estate broker, the highest rent in the city of London at that point was about £70 a square foot. Right. But it had been set years prior. Yeah. So that had been set. The highest rent had been set in the 90s. Yeah. And it had never been surpassed. So bearing in mind, it started in 2006. Yeah. The record rent was £70. Had been set years ago. Yeah. It took probably 5-10 years of working in London before rents finally broke over that £70 a square foot in the city of London, i.e. the financial district, the square mile. And now they're at 150 because there just isn't. They haven't got the supply. In the West End, where supply has always been more constrained for the reasons I described, just the nature of the stock, it's much harder to build new buildings in the West End. And the West End has always been more expensive. You've got people paying well north of £200 a square foot. Crazy. For somebody's just taken space in the old Economist building in St James's. Right. I think they're paying £240
That's
a
ridiculous.
square foot rent. It's just a mind-boggling number. But
so the demand is definitely there. It's just this. What do you see happening then over the next 5 years with this particular predicament?
Yes. Well, how does it work itself out? I think that ultimately the supply-demand curve will get to a point where the rents are so high that developers are able to push the button on schemes. Yeah. Now, whether you can do that in time to avoid a 2030 zero vacancy, I'd argue we're probably too late. Yeah. We're probably heading into some really difficult years. And when I say difficult, I mean just challenging from a logistical point of view, because where the market hasn't got any liquidity, it's quite hard for people to move, because if somebody's in an aging building that really deserves a back-to-bones refurbishment, the existing tenants have to move out for the landlord to get the building back to do that refurbishment. But if they're all renewing because there's no space in the market, then that building remains obsolete. So the kind of, you need an amount of vacancy to almost act as the lubricant in the engine of the commercial office market, and that's not there because vacancy is so low. So we could have a few years where people really want to move but can't because the stock isn't there. But then ultimately, economics will dictate that the situation will be resolved eventually. Because as rents fly high, if you've got a development site, you're going to push the button.
You're going to crack on.
we're probably talking about the seeds of the next downturn. Because everyone will suddenly see the economics looking great.
Yeah.
Developers will pile into the market. Everyone will build a ton of new office buildings. And then at some point, supply will outstrip demand.
Yeah. And then we've got the opposite end of the spectrum. Or the alternative is, things like the Fringe and, the Elizabeth line is obviously given companies options to move out a little bit and just kind of spread their wings, and in terms of not being stuck with London. So, we're sat in Maidenhead. There's a building going up 200 metres away from here now. So that is potentially a thing where they've just gone, well, do you know what, actually, the Elizabeth line is still easy for us to get into London. We'll jump to Maidenhead or Slough, and we can actually develop there.
Well, I think the biggest story in this, around that discussion, has to be, for me, Canary Wharf.
Mm-hmm.
So post-pandemic, as that balance of power shifted from employers to employees in terms of working from home, I think a lot of people woke up who were commuting into Canary Wharf and said, I don't really want to do that. And it just became a little bit less compelling for occupiers to be in Canary Wharf. And it started post-pandemic, post-Brexit, when the UK voted to leave the EU. There was the European Medical Agency had 300,000 square feet of office space in Canary Wharf. Following Brexit, they relocated that away from London, and 300,000 square feet is a big chunk of space. And then we had the pandemic, and a number of other big occupiers voted with their feet to leave Canary Wharf. So Clifford Chance, HSBC. HSBC was the big one. 1 million square feet. They committed to 500,000 square feet in the city of London.
Yeah.
So lots of people leaving Canary Wharf, and the vacancy rate was really creeping up in Canary Wharf. So it was, in terms of established London markets, by far the highest vacancy rate. And the irony for me was that this was at the point that Canary Wharf has really reached what should have been its golden age, because it finally had the Elizabeth line, giving it that phenomenal
logistics bit.
The Canary Wharf estate has become really diversified, so there's so much retail there. All the residential that's gone up on Wood Wharf, it's really like a 7-day-a-week destination. So just at the point where everything seems to have aligned, suddenly vacancies are really shooting up. Now, a lot of people were talking about the decline then of Canary Wharf, because people just didn't want to be there. But because the traditional financial core of the City of London has become so tight, suddenly there's been this massive upswing in Canary Wharf. And we're talking in the last kind of 3 to 6 months. Every time I open the press, they've done another deal. So HSBC, their 1 million square foot office they closed in Canary Wharf to take 500,000 square feet in the city. They've realised they didn't take enough space, so they went back into the market for 250,000 square feet and have actually taken it back in Canary Wharf. UCL, the university, has just taken 150,000 square feet in Canary Wharf. Visa has committed to hundreds of thousands of square feet in Canary Wharf. Revolut. It's just deal after deal in Canary Wharf. And I think it's largely because they've been displaced from core markets. And I think it's something that there's international trends.
I was going to ask you about this, because you're a member of a SIOR, is it?
Correct, yeah.
SIOR connection, which gives you international conversations. What's the general feeling on London, the UK, when you're speaking to your international peers?
So just to explain our international connections a little further, when I joined Spring 4 in 2006, we were just a pure London-based boutique. Then in 2012, Spring 4 was acquired by AOS Studley, which was a European US tie-up, and that gave us access to the world stage for the first time. We'd gone from being a UK-based brokerage to suddenly part of this much bigger network, and all the business opportunities that created. In 2015, we did a management buyout of Spring 4 to take it back independent again, but we'd really enjoyed being part of something bigger. So at that point, we were looking around for how we could get that, but on our own terms as an independent brokerage again. And the first thing we did was we joined something called Exis, which is a global network of independent tenant rep brokerage firms. And that's been really interesting for us to give us that international perspective. And then in 2023, I personally joined an organization called SIOR, which is Society of Industrial and Office Realtors. Now, that is a US-led organization. So memberships, just over 4,000, and about 90% of those are based in the US.
Yeah.
And so a couple of times a year, I go over to the US to their conferences and spend a few days just networking with, talking to, having great conversations with US brokers. And it's so interesting to hear about what they're finding in their markets, what their challenges are. And if we think we've had issues getting people to come back to the office in the UK, they are actually having much more significant issues in the States. So, for example, there are markets in the US where office vacancies are kind of 25%, which is way ahead of anything that you'll see in the UK. And they can't give office space away.
Christ.
And what that has led to is then the hollowing out of the downtown locations, because if there aren't office workers, then there's no shoppers.
Yeah, there's no shoppers, there's no restaurants, there's no Starbucks.
Suffers. And so you walk around a lot of big US cities, on a Wednesday at 11 o'clock in the morning, and it's like tumbleweeds floating down the street. Now, we often forget quite how big the US is, and there are markets that are very, very strong. New York is probably the most incredible office destination in the world, or office market, and it's doing incredibly well. But there are smaller markets. So Portland in Oregon has been almost the poster child for a struggling US office market, or a US city centre. Just various factors at play that mean vacancy rates there are very, very high, and you get good quality office buildings transacting at a capital value. This is not a rental value, kind of $20 a foot. So people buying and selling office buildings for next to nothing. So we think it's really important to have that international perspective. So I've really enjoyed my connection with SIOR, and the wider Springfield team have really enjoyed the connection through Exis. And I've really lent into that SIOR connection. So I'm the regional director for Europe for SIOR. So I get to be the spokesperson for
what's happening in Europe.
Yeah, what's happening in Europe, and talking to the Americans about it. And they're super interested.
That's amazing.
You kind of hear a lot of, in the press, you read about America becoming more insular and just more inward looking and less concerned about Europe. But certainly my anecdotal experience of going over to the US to talk to brokers is they're still very interested, and still see lots of
I mean, how much is media? We've referred to the media a couple of times in this, where bad news sells papers, right? And that's sometimes. I was skiing. I said to you before, when we were having a coffee, I was skiing last week, and every morning the lads put the news on whilst we were having breakfast. Honestly, by the time we got out onto the slopes, I was depressed. I was just like, get this bloody news off. It's doing my nutting. But then you speak to people like yourself today, and you're saying, nah, there's still demand there. People still want to get out there. There's still demand for people actually having these places. So when you're speaking to people on the ground, it's a different conversation to what, whatever news channel it is that you're watching at that particular time.
I think the bad news happens quickly. Good news happens slowly. And I think that's one of the reasons why the front pages are generally dominated by negativity, because progress happens so slowly. I remember reading this kind of thought experiment which said, if newspapers could only publish every 10, 20 years, what do you think the front page would be? It wouldn't be some war. It'd be humans living 20 years longer. That kind of, those big trends, they develop over time, whereas actually newspapers love an earthquake or a political crisis.
Yeah.
And
it's lots of that.
It's so easy to get drowned in that and become then pessimistic in your own personal outlook. But I guarantee that life gets a lot better when you have a generally optimistic outlook.
Yeah. I was listening to Chris Williamson. I don't know if you've heard of that podcast. He was on Diaries of a CEO, and he was talking about. I was listening to him this morning actually on the way to work, and he was talking about how that kind of negative outlook. Basically, he was saying, relax, chill. That negative outlook. When you fast forward 3 months, the issues that you've got today, you probably won't even remember. Outside of big stuff, but you probably won't even remember it. So what's catastrophized today? In 3 months' time, you'll go, what was that thing on November the 11th that I was really annoyed about? Just relax.
So true.
It's not that bad.
It's so important to just keep perspective.
Yeah. Let's talk about, we need to round it up a little bit. So let's talk about if I have an office move coming up. So I'm thinking about, I've got a lease event coming up of some sort. What advice would you give me? And I want to make sure, I want to make sure that I am making the best decisions for my organization over the next 5 to 10 years. What advice would you give me?
I think plan ahead. That has to be number one. Too many occupiers leave these kind of decisions too late and they're just paralyzed by indecision. So make sure you leave yourself enough time. And for pretty much anybody, that means thinking about the move at least a year out. So even for the smallest moves.
Yeah.
I think about it a year out. Number two is, and this should be self-evident in almost every walk of life, is take advice and make sure you're taking good advice and work with a genuine partner that can add value and help guide you through all the issues that you're going to face.
Yeah.
And so really what do people need now is flexibility, because there's just so much change in the market. So really what you need now is not going to be the same as what you need in 5 years. So try and bake that kind of flexibility into your lease. And lots of landlords who would never have considered giving away 3-year breaks or 5-year breaks will now do so because people want it. But then on the flip side of it is don't buy flexibility that you don't need. That's a very expensive hobby.
What do you mean by that? Because I'm thinking, you're talking about flexibility, right? And I'm thinking back to the comment you made a few minutes ago, which was in 5 years' time, there might not be any space. So you need to do something whereby you're going to be extending. So how do I create an environment today where in 5 years' time, I may or may not be moving, and in 5 years' time, the kind of the asset that I've got at that point in time, in 5 years, the requirements might be completely different. How do I build flexibility around that?
So I think that it's really important to think about how much space somebody's talking about. So if you have a big requirement, 50,000 square feet plus, that's when you really have to have long-term planning, and the risks of just not being able to find anything that works for you really comes into focus, and that's going to be your number one risk. So I think it really depends where you are on that size. That's a key determinant of what you need to be thinking about. So for a more modest occupier, when I talk about flexibility, I mean the ability to break your lease. If you have a big growth story and you want to go and take more space, then you need that early opportunity to get out.
Yeah.
Or at the other end, where as vacancy declines, I think it's really important that tenants negotiate Landlord and Tenant Act protection into their leases. So there's something called the Landlord and Tenant Act 1954, which gives commercial occupiers a statutory right to renew their lease at the market rent. So when your lease ends, if nobody's taking any action, you can actually just you can remain in the place for indefinitely.
Yeah.
And then if somebody takes the decision they want to stay, the tenant, for example, takes the decision they want to stay, they have a statutory right to a new lease.
Gotcha.
Now, despite that being legislation, you can contract out of the 1954 Act, so tenants can give away those rights.
Yeah.
And in a negotiation around a lease, lots of landlords will automatically say, I'm not willing to grant an inside the Act lease. And I think that too many occupiers yield those rights too cheaply.
Yeah.
We think it's absolutely critical that occupiers try and get their leases inside the Act because it's so valuable when you get to the end of your lease. That's really the way that you avoid having yourself over a barrel.
Yeah.
Where the landlord knows this party doesn't want to move.
Yeah.
Yeah. They've got a hard end date. If they stay on a day beyond that lease, they're a trespasser. I can throw them out.
Yeah.
They've got all the capex.
Or I can call my own price.
Exactly. Well, that's the quid pro quo of having somebody over a barrel. Is you've got the carrot and the stick. You know, the stick is, I'll turf you out, I'll put you on the street, and you won't have an office. It's chaotic. It's terrible for a company to lose its office with no replacement. But actually, they will cut you a deal, but it will be very, very expensive. And the lease will generally be on the landlord's terms.
Yeah.
So the ultimate win in terms of flexibility is trying to get a lease inside the Act. And at Spring Forward, that is like the heart of what we do when we're doing lease negotiations.
Yeah.
We will work very, very hard to get those leases inside the Act. And you know what? If you really push for it and put it at the heart of your negotiation, you can achieve it more often than you might think.
Well, and if it's a non-negotiable. And I think, look, your advice around seeking advice is absolutely crucial. You don't know what you don't know. And we're the same, right? You know, we obviously started an AV company and we come across it all the time where people go, it's only a bunch of screens on the wall. Let's just hang it and hope for the best. You don't know what you don't know. And then it's a real problem when it goes wrong.
Well, I think in terms of the long-term planning, I think often AV is one of the things that gets really left until the last minute for whatever reason. It's often an afterthought. Whereas coming back to what we spoke about earlier about what do employees want? They want a good experience in the office, and that's about functionality. AV is at the center of that.
Yeah, of course.
Yes, actually, it should be hugely important to have that as one of the first items on the agenda. Relating to the long-term plan.
Needs to be almost first in, but I would say that. Look, Chris, really, really insightful, specifically for me as well, and I've really enjoyed the chat. How can people get hold of you if they want to get hold of you? If they want to seek your advice on any kind of upcoming lease event or anything like that, how can people get hold of you?
So email me. You'll find my contact details on the website, or contact me through LinkedIn. Just drop me a message on there or connect with me on there, or just call the office, call my number.
Click the description that I put on this video.
I'd be delighted to help.
Brilliant, Chris.
Can we put my mobile number on there?
It depends what phone. You'll have a lot of cold callers call you. I think of you, a lot of suppliers try and call you. Look, Chris, I've enjoyed that. Thank you very much for spending some time with me. And description for Chris's details rather, or in the description below.
Thanks so much for having me.
Brilliant.
It's been great.
Thanks, Chris. Great. Hope you enjoyed the podcast, and I certainly enjoyed having that guest on. Now, in order for us to close this podcast out, what I want to do is just highlight to you that we're an AV company. That's pretty clear. But what we do with a lot of our clients is we offer them showroom visits, basically. So we quite often go around a lot of the showrooms that are available to us. We're doing a big LED showroom visit. So if you want to come and see some of the latest LED technology that you can deploy within your meeting room, we're doing a big LED showroom visit over the coming weeks. The date's not fully confirmed yet, but we have put together a wait list. The link to that wait list is in the description below. If you're interested in coming along and seeing the latest LED and what you can deploy within your office space and the art of the possible when it comes to LED, click the link below, join the wait list. When we've got the date confirmed for our showroom visit, we'll then invite you to that showroom. We'll show you what the art of the possible is. For now, hope you enjoyed the podcast. Like, subscribe, click the notification bell so that you see the next one as well.